Have you ever heard of Micanopy, Florida? If not, you're not alone, but you should have. This small town in central Florida is packed with history and a story I think more people should know about. Micanopy was the first American town established in Florida after the US took possession of the territory from Spain in 1821. It's also Florida's oldest town not located along the coast, a feat all on its own considering the state's swampy environment that made settling here a challenge in the first place. But its historical significance goes well beyond these mere milestones. What I appreciate most about Micanopy is just how many different lives this place has lived. I mean, from when it was initially settled by a friend of a president, to witnessing battles of the Second Seminole War, to its life as an industrial powerhouse fueled by the railroad boom, to a sleepy, swampy Florida backcountry town. I really can't believe I'd never heard about this place before I visited. So let's dive in, right here. From Fourth Place, your place to learn about US geography, urbanism, transportation, and city planning. So where exactly is Micanopy? Well, it's definitely not a place you just stumble upon on an interstate road trip, as it's tucked away in north-central Florida, about halfway between Gainesville and Ocala, just off US Highway 441. It's a small town with a population of only 650 people, according to the 2020 census, and it's always been that way, really, even from its earliest years of European settlement. Micanopy's history goes way back, even before the US took control of Florida. The Timucua tribe, who lived in the area for centuries, were the first to call this land home. Though in 1539, Spanish conquistador Hernando de Soto made the first European record of this land. Of course, you might have heard the name Hernando de Soto once or twice before. The famous explorer is most known for the European discovery of the Mississippi River and leading the Spanish conquest of the Incan Empire. De Soto is the first of a few famous names to have stepped foot in Micanopy over the centuries. In 1774, the famous American explorer and naturalist William Bartram passed through the area, and also noted the presence of indigenous settlement while studying and collecting botanical samples. Now, this intersection of indigenous land and early American settlers would later ignite a series of conflicts, leading to the formation of what would become the Micanopy town site, but more on that in a second. First, let's explore modern-day Micanopy, starting with the very center of it, the Micanopy Historic District. This entire area is on the National Register of Historic Places, and for good reason. The downtown is like a living, breathing time capsule, filled with late 19th and early 20th century homes, churches, commercial buildings, and even warehouses that have been repurposed over the years. There's just something special about stumbling on well-preserved Victorian-era architecture in the middle of north-central Florida. It was unexpected, but incredibly rewarding, especially considering these grandiose structures haven't just been left to rot like they have in many other forgotten American small towns. All of the buildings are being used to house something or another. One of my personal favorites downtown is the Feaster Building, constructed in 1903. Over the years, it's had quite the variety of tenants, from the town's post office to a number of general stores, to a telephone office, and even a ballroom where operas and plays were once held. It's one of those buildings that you can instantly appreciate still being able to see and feel in 2025, 122 years after it was first built. Today, it's home to a charming antique store. Right next door is the Benjamin Building, built in 1885. This was Micanopy's first brick building, and it was originally 2 stories tall, and featured the inscription S. H. Benjamin & Co., 1885 on the upper level. Sadly, a fire in the early 1900s destroyed the upper floor, and it was never rebuilt. Of course, it wasn't the only building in town built with that uniquely Victorian name and date inscription on it. In fact, it was kind of the thing to do during the Victorian era. And since starting this channel a little over a year ago, I've taken notice of many such features. From Portland to Tampa, from San Diego to Austin, from Wyoming to Miami. There's just something about the dignity our American ancestors took in the construction of their old buildings. They certainly built them to last, that's for sure, and I'm not sure how many modern buildings built in 2025 are gonna last over 100 years in the future. These commercial buildings are a far cry from the cheap, cookie-cutter strip malls and hollow new construction dominating American downtowns and commercial zones today. But I guess that's what makes places like Micanopy just that much more special, you know? Moving along down Main Street, I stumbled upon yet another historic structure in town, the Micanopy Banking Company building. Constructed in 1906, this place was once the financial center of the town, built during the railroad boom that had a major impact on the town's economy. Micanopy's banking history is also tied directly to the Florida land boom of the 1920s, when the Micanopy Banking Company was involved in financing real estate deals and land speculation. But when the housing market crashed in 1927, the Micanopy Banking Company was left with bad loans and forced to close, signifying a major shift in Florida's economy from speculation to more grounded industries like shipping, farming, and storage. From 1920 to 1930, Micanopy saw a population growth of over 32% to a total of 735 residents, a record number of people at the time. Micanopy's population wouldn't reach above 700 people again until 1980, when it had a total of 785 residents, up from a low of 612 in 1950. There's an entire rabbit hole that I'm really not interested in going down that explains why Micanopy gained back so much population, but in a nutshell, starting in the 70s and 80s, Micanopy was home to a cult that brought a lot of people over, and then also scared a lot of people away after a bunch of crimes were being committed. Just some generally weird stuff, you know? Some people claim that Micanopy is haunted or cursed or whatever, but the only ghosts I found were these old ghost signs, which Micanopy is chock full of. There's one on the Mott May building in downtown that reads, "Coffins, Caskets, and Supplies," a relic from when the building housed a funeral supply company and general store in the early 1900s. There's also this Standard Oil ghost sign, and even though they were responsible for dismantling the streetcar systems across America, I'll be damned if I can't appreciate a good ghost sign. There's also this restored Coca-Cola advertisement on the side of the Thrasher Warehouse building, which is now home to the Micanopy Historical Society Museum. Speaking of the Thrasher Warehouse, this place is actually essential when it comes to understanding Micanopy's industrial past. Built in 1890, the Thrasher Warehouse building is one of the oldest surviving wood-framed buildings in town. The Thrasher brothers, who were early pioneers in Micanopy's business and railroad industries, built this warehouse to store and ship local produce and timber. It was initially served by a branch of the Florida Southern Railway, and later the famed Atlantic Coastline Railroad, who, in 1883, constructed a branch line off of its main line that ran from Gainesville to Ocala. If you're interested in seeing some other relics of the Atlantic Coastline Railroad, check out the Orlando Amtrak station, originally built by the ACL Railroad in 1926, or even Tampa's Amtrak station, built by the ACL Railroad in 1912. Micanopy was a crucial link in the ACL Railroad's freight network. It was kind of the backbone of the local economy, and its connection to the railroad played a large part in making sure Micanopy was well connected to larger markets, and thus bringing money back into the town. The warehouse operated into the 1950s, and though it's not bustling with activity like it used to be, it still stands today as a testament to Micanopy's industrial and economic history. Not to mention railroad history, as the Atlantic Coastline Railroad tracks would have run right past the Thrasher Warehouse, eventually continuing all the way down Early Street and meeting at a junction with the Tampa and Jacksonville Railway. And today, the warehouse is a great place to learn even more about Micanopy. Just make sure you visit any day other than Monday when the museum inside is closed. One of the best preserved pieces of Micanopy's railroad past is the Tampa and Jacksonville Railway Depot, the town's other wood-framed structure from the late 1800s. This depot is still standing today as a private home. The Atlantic Coastline Railroad and the Tampa and Jacksonville Railroad would have met at a junction in a plot of land currently being used as the town's baseball complex. Amazingly, you can still make out the right-of-way running between home plate and the former depot building, which I only realized after returning home, hence the lack of footage. I feel like you can only see these sorts of things in such small towns that haven't been so constantly redeveloping and changing in the years since the decline of the railroad. Micanopy is also pretty unique in that sense too, as the only reason it ever had a railroad branch was because of its wealth of exports. This is a town that's never had its population grow past 800, and although the freight rail business was booming here, The passenger cars were hardly ever utilized by locals, though the railroad did bring people here to settle from the north, so its passenger service was successful in some sense. Of course, modern Micanopy's story didn't start with railroads or Victorian buildings. It began in 1821, when a man by the name of Edward M. Wanton, a Rhode Island-born trader and friend of President Andrew Jackson, set up a trading post in the area. The original location is believed to have been here, at the town's present-day central green space. Upon arrival, Wanton saw the potential for trading goods with the Seminole tribes, and his efforts helped establish Micanopy as a major trading center at the time. A year later, in 1822, a man by the name of Moses Levy arrived in Micanopy with similar aspirations. Together, these two men helped lay the foundation for Micanopy's early growth, with Levy even playing a main role in the planning and development of Micanopy's very first road system. And throughout the 1820s and early 1830s, business was pretty steady in Micanopy. But things didn't stay peaceful for long. In 1835, as tensions between the US government and the Seminole tribes escalated, the Second Seminole War broke out, and Micanopy became a major battleground. In response to the growing conflict, the US Army first established Fort Defiance in the area to try and secure and protect the region from attacks. In the summer of 1836, over 200 Seminole Indians engaged in attacks against the fort, killing dozens of American soldiers and heavily damaging the fort itself. The American soldiers threw everything they had at the Seminole Indians, and eventually forced them into a retreat, resulting in a technical victory for the US Army in what would later become known as the Battle of Micanopy. Though the victory wasn't really felt on the ground much at all, as the battle left most of the surviving American soldiers either heavily injured or infected with malaria. The fighting centered around Lake Tuscaloosa, just south of downtown, a major regional breeding ground for mosquitoes. As a result of the damages and the strategic perils of Fort Defiance, the Army built a new fort, Fort Micanopy, in a more strategic location nearby, roughly within this boundary highlighted in red, just west of downtown. The new fort was designed to better protect the settler community and deter any future attacks, which it mostly did. Though other, smaller battles did occur, including the Battle of Wellica Pond a month and a half after the Battle of Micanopy. That battle occurred in and around the site of the Montgomery Estate, another one of Micanopy's historic sites, being best known for its most prominent feature, the Montgomery Wall. A man by the name of Dr. Lucius Montgomery was one of Micanopy's earliest permanent residents and Micanopy's first physician. Dr. Montgomery arrived from St. Louis in the mid to late 1800s, settling down and starting a family here, and later donating part of this very estate in order to expand the adjacent Micanopy Historic Cemetery. And speaking of the cemetery, it's recently had trouble expanding even further due to the sensitive nature of having to expand into land that experienced heavy battle during the war. In the initial aftermath of the war, Micanopy struggled to rebuild. The town was officially incorporated in 1837, mostly in the hopes that it would bring people back into the town, which was mostly left in ruins at the time. The official incorporation would have helped the townspeople that stayed form a local government, as well as provide legal frameworks for protecting land and property, and even would facilitate the rebuilding of infrastructure, not to mention strengthen ties with the state and federal government. All of which was done to attract people back into Micanopy, which was by and large a success. There have since been homes built on the site of old Fort Micanopy, and they're still digging up artifacts from the era, which is pretty cool. You can see a lot of what's been dug up from the battles around Micanopy in the town museum I visited earlier. Oh, and by the way, the name of the Seminole chief responsible for leading the Seminole warriors into battle? Chief Micanopy. In fact, right before the outbreak of the war in 1834, the trading village, then called Wanton's, decided to change its name to Micanopy in an effort to ease tensions between the new American settlement and the chief. Chief Micanopy, along with many other Seminole Indians, were forcibly removed to Oklahoma following the end of the Seminole Wars. Despite the setbacks, the town of Micanopy survived, of course, and by the late 1800s, the arrival of the railroad sparked an agricultural boom, particularly in sugarcane, citrus, and vegetable exports. This new railroad-era prosperity funded the construction of Micanopy's Victorian-era downtown, and I'm happy to report that you can still see so much of that while exploring the town today, which I definitely recommend you do. And be sure to make time to explore the other sites in town that I haven't yet mentioned, like the Herlong Mansion, originally built in 1845 and since converted into a bed and breakfast. And you definitely can't miss the J.R. Mountain Garage building in downtown. The lot is a surviving example of the effect the advent of the automobile had on the town's built environment. It was built in 1913 as a garage and filling station. So what's Micanopy like today? Well, it's small. It's full of character. And it's also packed with natural and man-made beauty taking many forms. But most importantly, it's different. See, unlike many other historic towns in Florida that have either been overrun by gas stations, big box stores, fast food restaurants, or all of the above, Micanopy has managed to steer clear. The truth is, it's always been small, beautiful, and full of character. Micanopy was just kinda lucky that it wasn't swallowed up by a bigger project, be that a highway expansion, sprawl, or anything in between. It hasn't been overrun by tourism or modern development, and that's something I cannot say for like 99% of historic places in the state of Florida. Micanopy's downtown still feels authentic, locally owned, and slow-paced, and that's because it is all of those things. And sometimes that's just what the human soul needs, you know? I love cities of all sizes, and we should be able to appreciate even the smallest ones all the same. For now though, I'll see you next week from a much larger city located on the other side of the country, right here from 4th place.